Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Gaming with me, Tony Mo, and I'm here today to talk a little bit about a game called Lawbreakers. That's right, a few of you guys have asked me about the game, a few of you came and saw me stream it over the weekend, a few of you are interested in what Lawbreakers is all about and what the team at Boss Key is doing with it. Now, I've been fortunate enough to participate in Lawbreakers since the days of the alpha, which was actually about 7 months ago now, almost, I think, 6 or 7 months, and also fortunate enough to participate in the closed beta that happened just this past weekend. So I definitely have a lot to say about the game. I'm going to try and keep it short and just basically let you guys know why I'm excited for this game's future and why it will very likely end up being something that you see played on the channel at some point down the line. Now, when I played Lawbreakers in alpha, I felt like it was a game with some cool ideas that had all been thrown on the table. Like, we had a bunch of puzzle pieces, you know, but no one really knew how to put them together. In fact, some of them probably weren't even from the same set, but we were okay with that because we knew eventually we could find a way to make this mishmash of things work and it would all be badass in the end. That's kind of how I feel about Boss Key and what they were doing with Lawbreakers back in the days of the alpha. I mean, you had 0G, the ability to fire your weapon over your shoulder, you got crazy characters with electric hands and rocket launchers that sound like race cars when they fire the rockets out. A lot of really cool ideas. It just needed to be brought together. Flash forward 6 months later to the closed beta, and many of those ideas have been formed into some sort of a puzzle that I find quite addictive and hella replayable. And you know what? Since I'm talking about Lawbreakers, I kind of feel okay using the term hella. Lawbreakers has a very unique identity when it comes to its atmosphere and its theme. One that maybe isn't entirely original, but sure as hell feels like it is. I can't really describe Lawbreakers from a thematic setting without wanting to fuse together like 50 different genres. There's some Judge Dredd in there, there's maybe some cyberpunk stuff, there's maybe some street punk stuff, and of course a hell of a lot of sci-fi. It's a very interesting game, and when you go from kicking a guy in the face with your boot in 0G to hearing a member of the Breaker side calling one of the task enforcers out by saying he can smell their body spray from here, you can't help but laugh, grin, and feel really good about the game you're playing all at the same time.
I smell cheap body spray.
That's sort of Lawbreakers in a nutshell. And did I mention that there's a whole bunch of really great music just kind of injected everywhere throughout that experience I just talked about? Yeah, absolutely. The music in Lawbreakers is killer, and it just lends to the theme. When I booted up the beta and I just heard the music at the menu even, it was like I instantly had an idea about what Lawbreakers was. Like, it had suddenly and instantly identified itself as this game called Lawbreakers. I think that's sort of when you know somebody's doing something right. Because previously in the alpha, I was just like, Lawbreakers, okay, what does this all mean? Where's the connection here? But playing the beta, I totally get it. And when you have a sarcastic robot that quotes Johnny 5 and a guy who calls people out for wearing body spray, you get the theme that Cliff Bleszinski, Ariane Brucey, and everybody at Boss Key has clearly been going for. And you know what? I really like that theme because I don't think there is really a first-person shooter on the market or a game on the market that goes near the theme that they're trying to go with inside of Lawbreakers, and that makes me happy. Now, I actually tweeted at the Lawbreakers team about the music in the game. I said it was awesome, and a lot of people who watched my stream said it was awesome. You guys are doing a great job with this. They responded by saying that the music had been put in place to hype you up, to pump you up. I love the idea of music taking sort of a center focal point in a competitive first-person shooter experience. Music is often put at the back, and it's left outside. You gotta go see it backstage when the show is over. It doesn't really get to be a part of the experience typically. But here's Boss Key saying, we can use music to get people pumped up. We can be their Red Bull before each and every match if we just put music in the right place with the right sort of theme and the right sort of setting. I really quite like that. I think it's important that we admit that music is kind of like an audio drug for humans, and we can use it to affect our mood on any given day at any given moment. And the fact that Boss Key is using it to hype people up before they get into a match of Lawbreakers and keep them hyped during that match, well, that is also hella awesome. Now, Lawbreakers at this point is obviously taking some hero shooter elements and injecting it into what is aiming to be a high skill ceiling, high skill floor experience, one that really focuses on mouse and keyboard precision. Even though the closed beta did have controller support, I didn't really mess with that. It's clear that Cliff Bleszinski, Ari and Brucey, their roots with first-person shooters, both on PC and console across the two of them, have influenced Lawbreakers. The gunplay at this point feels absolutely fantastic, and it's probably one of the most addictive elements of Lawbreakers thus far. Of course, we also get the variety and the diversity of the different characters. So I can jump from the battle medic, who wields a grenade launcher and has the ability to heal people via bots, while I float in the air with her or his movement ability, to the Enforcer, who runs around with a more typical energy-based rifle, who can sprint and, throw like a grenade, an EMP grenade. This kind of feels like that typical Call of Duty character, except he can inject himself with a stim to make everything just happen way more quickly. Or maybe I want to play the Juggernaut. I want to play a robot that talks a lot of smack, that's full of wonderful, goofy sarcasm, who can use his mobility to sprint, to bound into the air, and then to smash back down to cause AoE damage while he tears through people with his close quarters focused shotgun. And it just keeps going from there, to the Gunslinger, to the Titan, to the... There's just so much going on with the character classes. You'll always have a different way to experience the game across these different classes, and there are more planned for the game's full release. I think there were actually 2 more that were shown as locked inside of the closed beta. So I'm looking forward to seeing how the other classes continue to add diversity to the roster and to how you can experience the game. But regardless of the class that I did choose, the gunplay always felt satisfying, it felt heavy, it felt powerful, and it sounded really, really good. I particularly enjoyed the sound design for these weapons. I think it's been taken up to the next level from Alpha. One of the things that continues to stand out to me is the Titan, who can be played either as Bombshell or Cronus depending on your side. And when that rocket is fired out of that launcher, it sounds like a Formula 1 car streaking by. Little bits and pieces of sound design like that, they stick out and they truly make a game feel unique and special. And Lawbreakers has that all over the place with its sound design. Not just in the music, the actual sound effects themselves. Now, of course, the big selling point, the big theme for Lawbreakers and its marketing is gravity, or the lack of gravity for that matter. There are zero-G environments located on all of the maps in the game, regardless of the game mode you're playing. These zero-G environments, they're aerial battlegrounds, and I find them to be incredibly enjoyable. I know that they are also the topic of quite a bit of discussion. Some people don't like the way they're being handled. They are, for the most part, physics-based, momentum-based. So if I run into a zero-G environment while stimmed, well, I'll be able to fly across that environment more quickly. Now, it's not as if I can't modify my movement within that environment. I can use my movement abilities if I have one. I can, jump and kind of move around through it. But I can, more importantly, use my primary weapon. I can either fire it forward to actually affect my movement, or I can actually fire it over my shoulder to boost myself through these zero-G environments. So they've really added an extra layer to the gameplay experience by saying, no, we're not just going to let you do like 6 degrees of freedom. We're not going to just give you like helicopter movement. We're going to really ask you to affect your movement through zero-G environments via propulsion and mobility and momentum. And of course, also the opportunity to sacrifice ammunition or, the need to reload when you get to the other side of the zero-G environment by firing rockets or machine gun rounds over your shoulder to not only potentially injure people behind you, but to move through that zero-G environment. I quite like that. There's like, that kind of feels unique. And there's 1 or 2 things that Lawbreakers does very, very differently when compared to other first-person shooters in the market that I really like. The zero-G thing is obviously a big part of it. I really, if anything, would just like to see them to continue to refine that. I don't want them to change how you move in zero-G. I know it's a negative for some people, but for me, it was a huge positive in just making zero-G feel like zero-G and not just like an area of the map where I suddenly move around more slowly and I can move up and down as far as I want. The other side of it is how they've actually handled the movement abilities for the different characters. So not everybody uses just a traditional shift. In fact, no one actually has a standard bogged down shift ability. While many of the characters can sprint, these sprint abilities often have alternative abilities built into them. For example, I talked about the Juggernaut, the robot with the shotgun. He can either bound up into the air when comboing his sprint or his movement ability with a jump, or he can smash back into the ground. The Gunslinger can sort of phase dash. The Enforcer can use it as an actual stim to boost his movement and his gunfire. And some characters, like the Titan, don't actually have a dash or a sprint ability whatsoever. They merely leap through the air, causing AoE damage as they hit the ground. Or maybe you are playing the Vanguard, who has a jetpack and is basically a minigun wielding jet fighter who flies through the air. I like that. I like how they took the sprint mechanic, which is basically the standard for all first-person shooters. Most people say if you're going to make a first-person shooter, you can't not have a sprint mechanic unless the game is going to be really fast. Well, Boss Key was like, okay, we kind of agree, but we're going to do a really different take on that. We're going to say, let's introduce player mobility, but let's make sure that we don't just give people a standard, left shift sprint ability. Let's turn that into something that actually affects the different characters, and that can in turn affect the gameplay and add layers to the gameplay, add layers to the gunplay. That shows effort to do something different, to break the mold and say, how can we, sort of look at the boundaries that have been set by first-person shooters today and maybe bend or break those boundaries a bit to create something that at least feels slightly new and that does add to our gameplay experience. Honestly, I could talk a hell of a lot more about Lawbreakers, but I think you guys get the idea. It's a game that I'm really looking forward to. I think Boss Key's doing some really cool stuff. I know it's kind of low-key right now. It still hasn't really gotten the press, but they're working on it. They're keeping things in closed beta. They're being smart about keeping a small testing community, letting people play the game, and making a hell of a lot of changes based on community feedback and, of course, based on what they see as they watch people play their game. It's come such a long way from alpha, and I can only imagine the changes we're going to see as we push further and further into closed beta, open beta, and eventually the game's release whenever that does happen. Either way, I will definitely be here along for the ride, just like I was with Titanfall 2, and maybe just one day, I'll be playing Lawbreakers right alongside of Titanfall 2 here on the channel. I think the game deserves the attention, and I think they're doing some really hella cool stuff. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you have any further questions about Lawbreakers, feel free to throw them down in the comments section below. I'll do my best to answer them, and I will see you in the next one.
The battery. Charging the battery.
Cheater!
You are definitely not gangster.